Hi, my name is Dr. John Douillard, and today I want to talk about the Akashic field, something well known and elaborated on in the Vedic texts, and something that is just beginning to be understood in quantum physics. Some of the best physicists like Nassim Haramein, Erwin Laszlo, and others actually equate the field that pre-existed the Big Bang to something called the Akashic field. So the Big Bang, as we know it, it created this sort of excitation of this underlying more primordial field that was understood to be conscious. In the Vedic text, it talks about this underlying field of pure potentiality, this field of Akasha, which means space, but not empty space, space that's quite filled with pure potential energy, creative intelligence, creative energy. And then upon the Big Bang, this field got excitated, and it created a host of frequencies, electromagnetic forces, and waves that appear to us when they're concentrated in clusters as particles that we see. It was when the Big Bang happened that we began to experience space and time. Before the Big Bang, and there was a before the Big Bang, there was this underlying field called the Akashic field that Vedic scientists, quantum physicists call the Minkowski vacuum, which is really not a vacuum at all. It's actually quite full. In fact, physicists believe it's so full that when they actually measure the density of the space in the universe, including all the planets and solar systems and galaxies, and there's a lot of space between those planets, that the density is the same in space has the same density as the space inside of an atom. So what we do know is that this space that we're talking about in between us right now is actually quite dense, quite full. And from the Vedic perspective, it was full of this pure potentiality, also called consciousness. And this is a new understanding that this field is in fact consciousness, and that this field is incredibly lively. Even some of the best physicists in the world, Tesla, for example, said if you want to know the secrets of the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. Max Planck said that there is no matter as such. All matter originates and exists only by virtue of a force that brings the particles of an atom together and holds this little minute solar system of the atom together, the nucleus with the spinning electrons. It's held by this force. And these atoms, when these frequencies and they concentrate, they appear to us as matter. But when you dive into the matter, you actually see nothing but space. Space that's as void as interstellar space. So it gets, pretty void out there, which is really, really important. So what Ayurveda said, or what the Vedic science said, is that this Akashic field relates to space, and that is the first element described in Vedic science. The element of space, which we talked about, precedes space and time. It precedes the Big Bang, when space and time started, and it's full, pure potentiality. And physicists actually do agree that there is a field. One of the electromagnetic fields is this field of pure potentiality, pure creative intelligence. In spiritual realms and religions, we talk about it as God or the Great Spirit, but there's something incredibly non-random and intelligent or informed about the universe that we live in. One physicist said that to say that the universe is just random would be like saying a hurricane blew through a junkyard and randomly assembled a plane that worked and flew. Probably never gonna happen. So the idea that the universe is random really isn't the case. And what physicists say is that there are these things, electromagnetic fields, frequencies, they call adapters. Adapters are the things that are the energizers that create the structure and the coherence and the form of the universe sort of after the Big Bang. So after this big explosion, there was this sort of organizing power. And this organizing power, they actually called adapters that sort of create coherence in the universe and the planets and how everything works so perfectly. Well, the experts, like great thinkers like Irvin Laszlo and others, believe that this field relates to the pranic field. And the next element from space, and in Vedic science, is when the space begins to move. And when it begins to move, the Vedas called it Shabda, which is the first ripple of that field. And when that field begins to move, it's called Spanda, which is, and when it moves as a vibration of consciousness. So this was described in Vedic texts. After the Big Bang, when it begins to move and gets organized, there's an electromagnetic field. They call adapters, this sort of cosmic energy that organizes everything, and that is understood as prana, the pranic field that a lot of physicists are now relating to. Well, in Vedic science, these elements, they unfold in sequence. They go from space, akasha, to prana, to fire, to water, to earth, a more solid substance. So when you look at the unfolding of creation from the Vedic sense, you have space which begins to move, and when it begins to move and excitate, it creates prana or vayu or air or movement. And when this movement begins to happen, this is the what they call in quantum physics the adaptic or the adapters, which create the coherence and the form and the structure and the organizing power of the universe. And that creates friction, and that friction creates heat, and that heat is Agni or fire, which is the next element in Vedic science, which could be considered the suns. And they formed, and they began to create attraction, and things started to become attracted to them and melt. And that created the next element that's formed in Vedic science called water. And then the water begins to liquefy and melt and create something that would hold it, and that was called Prithivi, or we call it in English earth, but it really means that which holds everything. And that would be the container for the liquid that the fire melted, that was created by the friction of the prana, or the movement of the fields from this subtle, non-moving space or Akashic ether field that started everything. Pretty cool, right? So that's sort of how it works. What is also understood, and this is work by Stephen Hawking and others, that this field is actually quite intelligent, and the consciousness of the Akashic field, the consciousness is alive and enlivened in each of the manifestations of the five elements: space, air, or prana, and fire, water, and earth. But it's also enlivened in all of the quantum fields, the strong and weak forces, gravitation, all the fields that quantum physicists talk about. There's consciousness enlivened in them, which means that the consciousness is not something that we create. Human brain doesn't create consciousness. We think that just because we're humans, we're therefore conscious, and we are now the ones who created consciousness. It's more understood that our brain is like an antenna that taps into this incredible pervasive field of consciousness that started from before the Big Bang, before space and time, to now in everything that we see and taste and touch. And that field is in fact consciousness. They equate it to like a spider who weaves a web, that web of consciousness, and then is able to crawl on its own web of consciousness, which is exactly sort of how it unfolds. Which means, in a sense, that our human awareness is really, really important. One of the other Vedic concepts is that the microcosm is kind of mimicking the macrocosm, as in the microcosm is in the macrocosm, which means like in the macrocosm, we have this huge void of empty space, which is conscious. In the microcosm, let's look at our microbiome. We can't see them. The little bugs are in the soil and on the foods we eat and the air we breathe, and they're experiencing and perceiving every change, shift, chemical adjustment of toxic, chemical, environmental pollutant from the outside world. We eat those foods, we breathe that air, those bugs come into our gut, they horizontally transfer that genetic material that they get or adapted to in the environment into the bugs in our gut, which horizontally transfer that genetic material into our genetic code, helping this host be ready for the changes that might be coming so we can survive. So the bugs provide this kind of feedback mechanism of the outside world to keep its universe, which is us, alive and well. In the macrocosm, we, as human beings with conscious thinking and thoughts, are both emitting and receiving consciousness like a radio antenna. And the thoughts that we have are uploaded into this great field of consciousness. Just like the microbes, what they feel, touch, taste, expose themselves to, toxins, glyphosate, they are feeding that information into our gut and transferring that genetic information to our genetic code so we're prepared and can evolve to stay alive and support the environment for the gut bugs. Well, we are doing the same thing to the universe. We are perceiving thoughts and the craziness in our political system and life stressors and things, and then we think about those and we upload those into the universe, and that conscious field takes that information. The Akashic field in particular, which is beyond space and time, will take and supposedly record all of that information and allow the conscious field at its origins in the Akashic field to evolve. So it's understood that and this is Stephen Hawking's work, that the field is evolving, that consciousness is evolving, that the universe is evolving. It's not just that us humans are evolving and matter is evolving or life forms are evolving, but the whole universe is evolving at the same time. And we provide, like the bugs provide for us, the input into the conscious field, the universe, so it knows how to either evolve or maybe even devolve, depending what the case may be. Which really means, is the point of this discussion, I've written a pretty comprehensive article citing all the science and research about how we got to this point, is that the thoughts that we have matter. And maybe in an individual thought, it isn't going to matter much in the conscious evolution of the universe, but collectively, we do make a dent. And that collective thinking uploads into this conscious field, this Akashic field, which can evolve or potentially devolve the universe. So I do think that it's important to recognize that what we do think and say and how we interact with each other, how we care for each other, and really and think about the impact that we have. We know that on the microcosm, that the bugs, when you put microbes next to a social disruptor or a stressful influence, the good beneficial bugs devolve and become less abundant, and the bad bugs that are more pathogenic become more populated. So we have the same thing happening in our universe. If we want to evolve this universe to experience something that's more expansive as opposed to contractive, to be more loving, giving, kind, and have an accepting universe, an accepting planet that accepts everyone as one people on one planet, that this whole idea is that we all came from the one field, this Akashic quantum field, which physicists all agree upon, and that we are uploading information into that one field. It doesn't make any sense for us to think on this planet that we should somehow continue to separate ourselves. And I think that's the message of quantum physics today, is that we can kind of pull in and realize that from the field of consciousness, that is our truth, we are all one. And then what we upload into that field should be a reflection of that understanding that we are all one. And I think fighting against each other, separating, isolating, becoming separate entities to be more safe and secure is an illusion, a temporary illusion that will end us up with more separation and more frustration and further away from that experience of deep contentment and satisfaction. That ability to take the risk to give, to care, to love, and to accept people, their flaws, their likes, their dislikes, their strengths and weaknesses and differences, to accept them as they are, is really the message of all religions. And all these religions really somehow tapped into this idea, which is now backed by quantum physics, definitely backed by Vedic science, that we all come from this same field. And we are all, in a sense, with religion and spirituality and with quantum physics, racing to experience the truth. The truth is that we all are one. And I think the more we can act that way, the better. So that's sort of the message of this article and the message of the Akashic field, a field of consciousness that has found itself becoming more separate. And finally, the cause of disease is also discussed in detail in Vedic science. And it's when the field of consciousness becomes matter, us, and the matter, us, starts to think of itself as separate from the field. And the cure of all disease from Vedic perspective is to restore the memory of pure consciousness, oneness, from the field of consciousness into the matter. And that is exactly what we just said. To restore the memory that we actually all are one. Despite our differences, our different beliefs and how we look, we are fundamentally all one. And restoring the memory of that is in fact the cure of disease, individually and collectively as a whole. Thanks for listening. I'm Dr. John Douillard. Do you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe and share.
This recording is brought to you by LifeSpa, where ancient Ayurvedic wisdom meets modern science. Get access to free health video newsletters by Dr. John at lifespa.com. These statements have not been evaluated by the FDA. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.